Welcome to the Olympus Report, demigods, monsters, and gods alike. It's time for Greeks and Romans to unite. Here's everything you need to know about the heroes of Olympus, the Mark of Athena. Before we jump into the best book in the Riordan verse, here's a little refresher. A new great prophecy was spoken. 7 half-bloods shall answer the call. To storm or fire the world must fall. An oath to keep with a final breath, and foes bear arms to the doors of death. The 7 half-bloods of the prophecy are Percy Jackson, son of Poseidon, Annabeth Chase, daughter of Athena, Jason Grace, son of Jupiter, Piper McLean, daughter of Aphrodite, Leo Valdez, son of Hephaestus, Frank Zhang, son of Mars, and Hazel Levesque, daughter of Pluto. Jason, Frank, and Hazel are Roman demigods and come from Camp Jupiter in California. Greek and Roman demigods have been kept apart by the gods, but now Hera wishes for them to reunite. Hera swapped Jason and Percy. Jason to Camp Half-Blood and Percy to Camp Jupiter, with no memories. Annabeth, Jason, Piper, Leo, and Coach Hedge sail on the newly completed Argo II to Camp Jupiter. Alright, now let's begin the Mark of Athena. The Argo II descends on Camp Jupiter with Jason in the forefront, hoping that if the Romans see him, they won't blast the ship out of the sky on sight. Also, Piper practices her charm speak just in case. Annabeth keeps having doubts. What if this wasn't such a good idea? She prays to her mother Athena for guidance, but remembers that's currently not possible. Before the Argo II can land, there's an explosion. Terminus, the god in statue form, which guards the city of New Rome, is absolutely freaking out because weapons are not allowed within the city limits, and the Argo II is basically one giant weapon. He also believes Greeks to be the enemy. Jason and Piper try and reason with him, but when that doesn't work, Annabeth steps in. But he's even less responsive to Annabeth, calling her a daughter of that goddess. Annabeth isn't sure what that means. Annabeth tells Leo to keep the ship hovering over New Rome and they will descend on rope ladders. Terminus decides this is okay for now. Annabeth can't help but notice just how beautiful the city is. Finally, Reyna and the rest of the Legion greets them. Reyna is welcoming Jason home, but is interrupted by Annabeth and Percy surging forward for a much-deserved reunion kiss. And then Annabeth judo flips him into the pavement. With her arm against his throat, she warns Percy to never leave her again. Percy laughs and says, "Consider him warned." Annabeth then helps Percy up. Jason clears his throat. Jason then introduces everyone to Reyna. Reyna tells the Centurions to prepare a feast for their guests, much to Octavian's horror, who still considers Greeks the enemy. Reyna, however, dismisses him and tells Annabeth and Jason to follow them as it is time to catch up. At dinner, Percy excitedly tells Annabeth about New Rome, and Annabeth can't help but feel jealous. What about Camp Half-Blood? That's their home. But before she can say anything, Jason stands up and tells the Romans everything that has happened to him, going to Camp Half-Blood and rescuing Hera. Then Percy recounts his side of the story, coming to Camp Jupiter and going to Alaska. Both stories have one key enemy, Gaia. As Jason and Percy are sharing, they both thank each other for looking out for each other's camps. A sort of bromance is forming, if you will. Reyna then interrupts them to talk about the prophecy of 7. Some of it is becoming clear. Foes bear arms to the doors of death is talking about Romans and Greeks working together. Hazel then speaks up, telling everyone that Nico went looking for the doors of death and has disappeared. Percy promises her that they will find him. Thanatos had told Percy that now that he's free, monsters will return to Tartarus, but if the doors are kept open, they can keep escaping Tartarus, so the doors of death need to be closed. Thanatos said that the answers they seek are in Rome, the original Rome. Reyna then says that it's forbidden for demigods to set foot in Rome, as it is even more dangerous there, being the birthplace of monsters. Jason says either way they must go and hurry as they're running out of time. Reyna then brings up who should go. It needs to be a mix. Annabeth says it has to be her, Percy, Piper, Leo, and Jason. And then Percy says Hazel and Frank also need to come. Octavian at this is outraged. He says this needs to be voted upon, but before anyone can argue with him, Ella and Tyson join the group, and Ella sprouts a prophecy. Wisdom's daughter walks alone. The Mark of Athena burns through Rome. Twins snuff out the angel's breath. Who holds the key to endless death? Giant's bane stands golden pale, won through pain from a woven jail. Annabeth goes still. She feels the coin currently sitting in her pocket burn at the mention of the Mark of Athena. Octavian is also shocked. He asks if that was a prophecy, and Percy says no, of course not. Ella just likes to read books. Thankfully for the time being, Octavian drops it. Rena then goes back to the issue at hand. The quest, which unfortunately Octavian is right, they need to get the Senate's approval first. Octavian is still not satisfied and says he doesn't trust them, so Leo offers to give Octavian a tour of the Argo II, show him that they are harmless. Octavian reluctantly agrees. Before the Senate meeting, Jason asks if he can take Piper on a tour of New Rome, and Reyna asks if she can speak with Annabeth privately. So Reyna takes Annabeth on a tour of the city, and as much as Annabeth doesn't want to admit it, she can't help but admit that the city is incredible, especially the architecture. Reyna explains to Annabeth that Minerva, Athena's Roman form, is a bit different in Rome, perhaps the most different of all gods. Minerva isn't a war goddess in Rome and is considered a mating goddess, so it's a bit shocking to the Romans that there could be a child of Minerva. Reyna then brings Annabeth to her favorite spot, the Garden of Bacchus, and asks Annabeth to convince her that the Romans can trust the Greeks. So Annabeth tells her everything, Annabeth's entire story, her relationship with her family when she ran away with Thalia and Luke, and her time at Camp Half-Blood. However, Annabeth can't seem to tell her about the recent argument she had with her mother, nor the nightmares she's been having, or the silver coin currently sitting in her pocket. Reyna says Romans don't work well with other powers, and Annabeth says that they can work together. It's the only way to defeat Gaia. Reyna agrees and then tells Annabeth a story she needs to hear if she decides to sail to Rome. When Reyna was still working on Xerxes Island, a boy washed up on the shore, a son of Athena, except he had gone completely insane, mumbling on and on about the Mark of Athena, the same prophecy that Ella just spoke. He had gone to Rome to search for the mark, and it had driven him crazy. Annabeth has never heard the prophecy before today, but she remembers the argument that she had with her mother. Athena had ordered her to follow the Mark of Athena and had given her the silver coin, which now sits in Annabeth's pocket. Reyna then begins to explain why she thinks Romans and Greeks have never been able to work together, something that has to do with Athena. But before Reyna can continue, the city is rattled with explosions. The Argo II has begun firing on New Rome. Annabeth is shocked. This has to be a mistake. They would never do this. Reyna believes her but says someone must be held responsible, and the two rush to the city. When Annabeth reaches the Argo II, her friends are surrounded by angry Romans, and Jason's head is bleeding, and Piper's term speak is having no effect. Annabeth spots Percy deflecting angry Romans with the fountain water. By his side is Frank and Hazel. Percy asks what's going on, and Annabeth doesn't know. Then Octavian climbs down the rope ladder from the Argo II, claiming that Leo has fired upon the city. Then the Legion in full armor shows up, and Octavian orders them to kill the traitors. Annabeth decides that they need to get out of there now. Percy turns to Frank and Hazel and asks if they will come with them, and of course they agree. But first they need a distraction. Hazel calls Orion and tells Percy to send her an iris message when they escape. Hazel then takes off, pushing Romans out of the way and leading the Legion towards her. Percy asks Frank to help Piper and Jason, so Frank turns into a dragon and swoops them up as Percy and Annabeth climb up the ladder to the Argo II. When they reach the deck of the Argo II, Leo is indeed firing upon the city, but he has a weird twisted look to his face. He keeps chanting, "Destroy them all." Percy then tackles him to the floor and Leo hits his head and passes out. Annabeth takes control of the ship, which is steered with a Wii controller, and then they fly away from New Rome and Camp Jupiter. When Leo wakes up, he has a pounding headache, and he wishes he could invent a time machine so he can slap himself. His ship is in shambles, and the gold figurehead at the front of the ship, Festus, is coughing smoke. Annabeth asks Leo to explain what happened. Leo isn't sure. Everything is fuzzy. It was like he could see himself doing those things, but he had no control of his own body. All Leo knows is a cold feeling overcame him, and the next thing he knew, he was firing upon the city with no control of himself. Annabeth is then called below deck to help with Jason, who suffered a nasty head wound. So Annabeth asks Frank to watch Leo, and this makes Leo feel terrible. For some reason, there seems to be a certain kind of tension between Leo and Frank. Leo says he needs to get a damage report on the ship and takes Frank and introduces him to Festus. Frank is super surprised that the ship head is alive, and Leo explains that he used to be a full dragon but suffered an accident, so now he's just the masthead of the Argo II. The ship isn't in too bad of shape, but Leo will still need to make some repairs. He's gonna need some tar, lime, and celestial bronze. Festus then tells Leo that Hazel is below them. Frank says they need to go down and get her, but Leo says the ship is only going to be able to land once before he can fix it. So they need to land where they can get the supplies, so Festus does a scan for some celestial bronze. Annabeth and Percy then come back, and Annabeth says Jason should be fine after some rest. Leo then explains about the ship and says they're in luck. All the stuff they need is in one location. Leo tells Frank to fly down and tell Hazel to meet them in Great Salt Lake, Utah. Leo then lands in a lake and is super surprised when Hazel and Orion come aboard. Leo asks if the horse can fly, and Hazel says no, he can just run over any surface, including water. Leo then notices how pretty Hazel is, but he tells himself to forget this thought as she's Frank's girlfriend. Hazel, Frank, Percy, and Annabeth meet in the dining room to discuss everything. They need to figure out Ella's prophecy, but first they need to fix the ship as Octavian will be looking for them. Once again, Leo apologizes for everything that happened. Annabeth says they've all agreed it couldn't have been Leo. It was most likely Gaia manipulating him somehow. Frank is worried that it will happen again, and Leo says he's fine, but Annabeth says they should travel in a buddy system, just in case. They then split up to look for the supplies. The tar is at a store, and the lime and celestial bronze are on an island. Percy says splitting up sounds like a bad idea, but Annabeth says it's for the best, as if there's more than 3 demigods together, they would attract too much attention. Percy and Annabeth ask if Frank will fly them to town, and Frank hesitantly agrees as this leaves Leo and Hazel to go look for the tar and lime. Hazel says she'll take Leo on Orion to the island to go look for the celestial bronze and lime, and Frank doesn't like this but agrees. Before Leo and Hazel leave, Percy tells Leo Hazel's entire background and says not to mess with her. Leo and Hazel then set off on Orion, and Leo absolutely loves the thrill of the ride. Once on the island, they find the lime right away. Leo says the sand is lime, but the celestial bronze will be a bit trickier. Leo notices that Hazel keeps staring at him, and Hazel says he reminds him of someone she used to know. Leo asks if it's Sammy. Hazel asks how he knows that, and Leo says she almost called him Sammy. Hazel then asks if Leo is from New Orleans, and Leo says no, Houston, Texas. Hazel then drops the subject, but Leo can't help but wonder who this Sammy is. Is it someone from Hazel's life in the 40s? And why does Leo look so much like him? Hazel then says the celestial bronze is about 500 yards away. Leo asks how she knows this, and Hazel says it's a daughter of Pluto thing. She can sense precious metals. When Hazel and Leo get closer, they see a woman sitting on a rock, and she's cracking open fortune cookies. When the pair get closer, Leo calls out, "Aunt Rosa?" But Hazel sees her old teacher, Mrs. Lear. The woman is Nemesis, goddess of revenge, and each person who sees the goddess sees who they despise most. Hazel's teacher, who called her a cursed child and her mother a witch, and Leo's aunt, who called him a devil child and blamed him for his mother's death. Nemesis tells Leo and Hazel that the gods are in a bad way right now, torn between their Greek and Roman forms, as war is coming, and the gods blame Hera/Juno for reuniting the camps in the first place. So the goddess is in hiding and won't be able to help our heroes anymore. However, Nemesis is totally fine, as she is the same in both Greek and Roman forms. Nemesis tells them that she's here to help, but help requires sacrifice. Hazel says she's already sacrificed enough, her mom, her life, and now her brother is missing. Nemesis says yes, after today, if Nico is not rescued, he will die in 6 days, along with the rest of Rome. Nemesis then tells Leo that his hardships are yet to come. He will always be a 7th wheel, and tells him soon he will encounter a problem he can't solve. Nemesis then gives Leo a fortune cookie and says that it will give him the answer he seeks when the time is right. But using the cookie comes with a sacrifice. The goddess then rides off on her motorcycle, and Leo and Hazel continue in the direction of the celestial bronze. On the way, Leo thinks of what Nemesis told him. He'll always be an outsider, a seventh wheel. He doesn't belong. Hazel can tell that Leo is upset and tells Leo not to think too much about it. That's Nemesis's job, to stir up resentment. Leo, however, can't shake the doubt from his head. Leo and Hazel then find a girl, but when they talk to her, she just repeats back everything they said. They realize this is Echo, a girl cursed only to repeat the voice of others. Quickly though, Hazel and Leo realize that she's trying to tell them something. She needs help. So Echo leads them in a direction and they follow. They reach a pond and it's surrounded by several nymphs that are staring at something. So Hazel and Leo get closer to see what it is. When they get past the nymphs, they see a man gazing into a pond, and he is drop-dead gorgeous. The nymphs are all hoping for his attention, but the man, who is revealed to be Narcissus, is more interested in staring at his own reflection on a giant piece of celestial bronze, sitting at the bottom of the lake. When the nymphs see Echo, they tell her to leave. Echo used to be a nymph like them, but was cursed by Hera. Echo wants to save Narcissus, but the other nymphs say he doesn't need saving. Narcissus was cursed by Nemesis to fall in love with his own reflection. He died staring at his own reflection, but now has come back to life by exiting the doors of death, and Echo doesn't want him to suffer the same fate twice. But Narcissus refuses to leave the celestial bronze, which he's using as a mirror. So Leo comes up with a plan, as they need the celestial bronze, and maybe if they take it, Echo may be able to save Narcissus. Leo says he and Echo will cause a distraction, and when Narcissus turns away from the metal, Hazel can summon it to her through the ground. Leo then gives himself a makeover, and struts over to the nymphs, and Narcissus chanting, "Leo is the best, make way for the king. Narcissus is weak and a loser, and Leo is a bad boy, and all the ladies love a bad boy. All the cool ladies are on Team Leo." Very slowly, the nymphs start to agree, finding Leo attractive in a scrawny kind of way. Very slowly, all the nymphs start joining Team Leo. Narcissus is angry, but when he realizes the mirror is gone, he's furious. And then the spell's broken, and Narcissus says whoever gets his shield back will get a kiss. The crazed nymphs then chase after Leo. Leo catches up with Hazel and they call Orion. Echo decides to stay back and hold off the mob. Leo says Echo is way too good for Narcissus and she should just forget him and come with them. But Echo still believes that Narcissus can be saved, so stays behind. Leo and Hazel then race off for the Argo II. Meanwhile, back on the Argo II, Piper is going crazy with worry for Jason, who still hasn't woken up. Piper debates using her old blade Catoptris to look into the future, but the last time she did this, she saw horrible visions. However, her curiosity wins and she once again looks into the knife in hopes of finding some answers. The dagger shows her Camp Jupiter, and Octavian is rallying the Legion to go after them. The dagger then shows her quick images: Jason with gold eyes instead of blue, a bull in a river, 2 gold giants, and the most terrifying one of all, her, Jason, and Percy drowning. Piper shakes the dagger and pleads with it to show her something useful. The image then shifts to a road sign that reads Topeka 32, and there is a man standing under the sign in a purple camp shirt holding a goblet. But before Piper can think too much about it, Jason wakes up. Piper asks if he knows who she is, and he says last time he checked, she was Piper, his awesome girlfriend. Piper is super ecstatic that Jason is okay and hasn't once again lost his memories, but before they can talk, Leo and Hazel get back, and then Percy, Frank, and Annabeth get back, and Leo goes to begin repairs on the ship. But things aren't going to be easy as the river nymphs have caught up and seem to be trying to sink the ship. So Percy goes to try and talk to them. Thankfully, Percy manages to buy enough time and Leo fixes the ship and the Argo II takes off, and everyone then meets in the dining hall to discuss the events of the day. Leo says that what he did was only a temporary fix, and they really need to sit down once more before traveling across the Atlantic. Percy mentions that in Salt Lake, Frank spotted some eagles, so the Romans can't be far behind. Piper then brings up the vision she saw in her night. Annabeth says the twin giant sounds like the prophecy that Ella spoke. Twins snuff out the angel's breath. They then try and figure out what the rest of the prophecy means. Annabeth brings up what Raina said about Athena being the reason Greeks and Romans don't get along. Leo says Nemesis said something similar, that a score needs to be settled, but no one knows what it could be. Until they do, they need to focus on other things, like fixing the ship. Annabeth says that they should set down close to a city so they can stock up on supplies. Piper then brings up the last image she saw of Topeka 32 and asks how they feel about Kansas. The Argo II then touches down shortly after in Kansas. Leo and Annabeth stay behind to work on the ship, and Hazel and Frank go to scout the area for any signs of Romans. So that leaves Percy, Piper, and Jason to go check out the location Piper saw in her dagger. When they set off, Piper quickly realizes that Leo didn't land quite close enough. They are still 8 miles away. And that's a lot of Earth to cover when the Earth goddess kinda has it out for you. So Jason calls Tempest, his wind horse, and not wanting to be outdone, Percy calls Blackjack. Both horses arrive, Blackjack first, much to Percy's smugness, and they carry our heroes the rest of the way. Once there, they find the man from the vision, Bacchus, or better known to Percy as Dionysus. When Percy calls him Dionysus, however, the god shifts back and forth, clutching his head in pain. Bacchus yells to stop thinking of him in his Greek form, as it's currently hard enough to stay in one form as it is. Bacchus was sent here to meet with Ceres, aka Demeter, to discuss war regarding Gaia. Jason says they have no knowledge of this, but came here hoping to seek wisdom. Bacchus tells our heroes that the twin giants are known as Otis and Ephialtes, otherwise known as the anti-Dionysus giants. Piper realizes these are the giants she saw in her vision, and maybe the dagger told her to come here as they will need Bacchus' help to defeat them when they reach Rome. Bacchus laughs at this and says he has no interest in helping them, as no one has given him a proper tribute in many years to elicit that kind of help from him. But Bacchus does give our heroes some useful advice. He tells them to seek out Perseus, a son of Gaia who hates his mother. They will find him in Atlanta. He will have information about the twin giants. Then a cold wind sweeps over the land. Bacchus announces it's time to go and leaves. Piper thinks they should do the same, but before they can, a voice speaks up that it's too late. It's Gaia. She tells Piper that she requires the blood of one male demigod and one female demigod for her plan. Therefore, she doesn't need Jason and Percy alive, just one of them. Gaia tells Piper to choose who will die. Piper refuses, so Gaia says then she'll pick. When Piper looks at Jason and Percy, their eyes are glowing gold. They are no longer in control of their bodies. They raise their weapons and charge each other. They begin to fight. Percy knocks Jason off Tempest, and Jason summons lightning and knocks Percy back. Jason is just about to kill Percy when Piper manages to make him hesitate with charm speed. But then a voice, not Jason's, comes out of his mouth and says no, he must die. Only one can live. Piper demands to know who this is, and the voice calls himself an Eldion, a ghost from the underworld who wants to live again in Jason and Percy as promised by Gaia. Piper then realizes this is what must have happened to Leo when he attacked Camp Jupiter. Then Percy and Jason continue attacking each other. Percy manages to knock Jason out and Percy goes for the kill. But Piper uses her charm speed, but not on Percy, on Blackjack, and has the Pegasi knock Percy out. With Blackjack's help, Piper puts both of the boys on his back and they head to the Argo II. When they get back, Jason and Percy slowly come to and both apologize for almost killing each other. Everyone meets up to discuss what happens, and Jason says maybe if Piper talked to Raina and explains about the Eldions, the Romans would call off the attack. Hazel says this is hopeful thinking and that it won't work. This is the excuse that Octavian has been looking for years to destroy the Greeks. And Frank says that he's closing in on them. When they were scouting, they saw even more eagles. Percy asks how they keep finding him, and Frank says that the eagles can track their scent. So for the time being, they decide to move on and they set off for Atlanta. And then to Rome to hopefully save Nico and fight the twin giants. But they probably shouldn't count on the help of a god, so they have to figure out another plan. Jason says that if they go to Rome, the Romans won't be able to follow them, as Rome is forbidden territory, and they will be considered outlaws as well as traitors. Piper then mentions what Gaia said about her needing a male and female demigod as a sacrifice. This makes Percy remember something. In a dream when he saw Polybides marching towards Camp Jupiter, the giant had said that demigod blood was the key to waking Gaia. So until they understand the prophecy fully, they should really avoid being captured. So much doesn't make sense. The Mark of Athena, the twin giants, Ella's prophecy, how does it all fit together? Annabeth decides for now they should get some sleep, as they're all tired, and they'll work on figuring it all out after Atlanta. But before everyone leaves, Piper tells them to wait. The Eldians are still here. Hazel agrees. She can sense them, probably lurking inside some of them. Leo asks how they will be able to tell, and Piper says she has a plan. Piper then uses her charm speak and tells the Eldians to raise their hands. Leo, Jason, and Percy's eyes turn gold, and they raise their hands. Piper then channels all of her power into her charm speak and commands the spirits to leave their friends' bodies and swear on the river Styx never to return to the ship or possess any of their friends again. Thankfully, this works, and the spirits vacate the bodies of Leo, Jason, and Percy. Jason and Piper then take a walk on the deck to get some fresh air, and Piper secretly prays that Jason won't be the one sacrificed, but she immediately feels bad because she doesn't want Percy to be sacrificed either. He seems like a nice guy, and Hazel and Frank genuinely seem like good people. Piper then asks Jason what he knows about the Mark of Athena, but Jason is really hesitant to talk about it. When Piper asks why, Jason says that it's always been a point of contention between Romans and Greeks. Many thousands of years ago, the Romans invaded Greece and stole something that has to do with Athena. And ever since then, Greeks and Romans have been at odds for each other, and select daughters and sons of Athena have been sent to go look for the item, but none have never found it. Piper says to Jason that Annabeth won't be angry at him for knowing this information, and that he should really tell her, and Jason says he will when they get closer to Rome. But Jason hopes that not all of the myth is true, because it says if the item was ever found, the Greeks would use it to destroy Rome. And after what Nemesis said about Rome being destroyed in 6 days, Jason worries all the more. Piper then asks Jason if he wants to go back to Camp Jupiter, and Jason says only if Piper comes with him. This should make Piper feel better, but she can't help but worry about everything they will have to face in the coming days. That night, Percy has nightmares. He's once again dreaming about drowning in Alaska. Ever since the incident, Percy has developed a slight fear of water and drowning, something he's never had to worry about before. Then the dream shifts. Percy sees the twin giants, and they're standing in a stadium with weapons, pulleys, flamethrowers, and ballerinas. They are preparing for something, but the twins are fighting on how exactly they should do it. A big performance scheduled for July 1st, when they will destroy Rome. And they will lure the demigods here to destroy them with the bait. Percy then sees what the bait is. Nico trapped inside a jar. Surely he should have suffocated by now, but then Percy sees pomegranate seeds. Seeds from Persephone's garden. Hazel had explained to him when eaten they put you in a hibernation state. But even this only lasts 1 day, and Nico is running out of seeds. The giants then talk about a statue, and how it's well guarded by her, and no one will ever be able to take it. Percy is then woken up by Annabeth. It's the middle of the night, and Annabeth tells Percy to follow her. She wants to spend some time with him and show him her favorite parts of the ship. She brings him to the stables, which have a glass floor. Percy and Annabeth sit and gaze out on the landscape. Annabeth tells Percy that it reminds her of the zoo truck they took to Vegas, when she and Percy first started to become friends. It reminds her of everything they've been through up until this point. Annabeth tells Percy just how much she missed him, and Percy says the same. She's what gave him strength to keep going. He had to get back to her. Percy then tells Annabeth about his dream of living in New Rome together, safe from monsters. Annabeth is touched, but says that may not be possible now with the Romans after them. Percy then brings up his dream, telling Annabeth that Nico is somewhere underground in Rome, and how the giant said something about a statue. Annabeth then tells Percy about her meeting with Athena. Athena wasn't herself, struggling to maintain either her Greek or Roman form. She told Annabeth that she had failed her. As well as that, Annabeth has been having nightmares of her own that make no sense. But she doesn't want to talk about that now. She and Percy cuddle, kiss, and then they fall asleep. In the morning, Frank finds them and says they are going to be in so much trouble with Coach Hedge. Naturally, teasing ensures Coach Hedge yells a bit, but thankfully the issue is dropped, and then everyone meets for breakfast. They then discuss Percy's dream, and they realize that the prophecy is talking about Nico. Nico's last name, Angelo, means angel, and if Nico holds the key to endless death, that must mean that Nico found the doors of death before he was captured, but they're running out of time to rescue him. Leo then brings up if they can actually trust Nico, and Jason agrees. He knew about both camps and didn't say anything. At this, Hazel yells, "How could they say that? Nico risked his life to find the doors of death, and he rescued Hazel from the underworld." Hazel then storms away, and Piper says that was pretty cold. Leo and Jason look ashamed. Leo then announces that they are close to Atlanta, and Percy says he'll seek out Orpheus and asks Frank to come with him, as Orpheus is a son of Poseidon, and Frank and Percy are descendants of Poseidon. Percy wants Annabeth to come as well, but after the incident last night, Coach says no way and volunteers to go instead. The ship sets down and Percy and Frank head off into the city. They get a cab ride from a woman named Esther. Percy asks her what's the first thing that comes to mind when he mentions salt water, and she says the aquarium. Percy and Frank figure that's a pretty good place to start, so they head over. Once at the aquarium, they are greeted by a lady named Kate, who treats them to the full VIP package. She takes them to the gift shop, and Frank picks up some extra clothes and a Chinese finger trap. He's a little offended being Chinese, as he's never seen the thing before. Percy and Frank figure this must be a trap, but they don't have any choice, so they head deeper into the aquarium. And for the first time ever, Percy is really nervous being surrounded by so much water. He can't shake the feeling of drowning. Kate then takes them to the special creatures exhibit, and Percy is absolutely horrified. In tanks, they have nymphs, nereids, sea creatures, and they're all being forced to perform, and they're clearly in distress. Percy wants to know how they could keep them in there like prisoners, but before Kate can answer, a man interrupts them. Orpheus, Kate's brother, and Kate's name is actually Keto. They got her name tag wrong, and she's the goddess of sea monsters. Her and her brother were exiled to Atlanta. Keto then takes Hedge on a tour as he's super interested in the killer monsters, and Percy tricks Orpheus with flattery to reveal some information. Otis and Effie Altes are always trying to put on flashy shows, and they're currently working on Gaia's plan to destroy Rome and lure specific demigods there to kill them. But two must be kept alive. The twins are using another demigod as bait, or perhaps they may come looking for the Mark of Athena. All this Percy and Frank already know, but then Orpheus reveals some new information. It would be foolish to go look for the Mark of Athena, even if they did have the map, which is currently in Charleston. It wouldn't matter because there's a bounty out on these specific demigods, and everyone wants to capture them, including Orpheus. Orpheus then tells Percy that they've come to the end of their VIP tour. VIP standing for very important prisoner. Orpheus then leaves and the glass dome over them cracks and they are submerged in water. Percy panics. He holds his breath for as long as possible, but eventually he takes a breath and all is okay. He can still breathe underwater. He then remembers Frank, but thankfully Frank is okay. He turned into a goldfish. He panicked and turned into the first thing he could think of. They then search for a way out. Percy spots Coach Hedge and gets his attention. Coach Hedge then judo kicks Keto in the head, knocking her out, and then they come up with a plan. Frank transforms back into a human and they all punch the glass at the same time, shattering it, and they are able to escape and make it back to the Argo II. Leo then takes off. They explain everything that happened, the captured creatures, the bounty on their heads, and this map that they need to find in Charleston. Annabeth says they should free the creatures, and Percy says he will, once he figures out how. But currently they need to head for Charleston to find the map to the Mark of Athena. Jason then brings up that he's been to Charleston before and knows of two places the map might be: the museum and a park near the harbor. While everyone is talking, Frank fidgets with the Chinese handcuffs he took and he gets trapped. He panics and turns into an iguana to get out of them. At this, everyone laughs and Leo pokes fun, making Frank feel pretty bad about himself. Frank, Leo, and Jason decide to go to the museum, and Piper, Hazel, and Annabeth will go to the park. In the meantime, everyone splits up. Annabeth goes back to her room and looks through Daedalus's laptop, hoping to find some kind of information, but doesn't find anything. She then looks at her Yankees cap of invisibility, but it no longer works. Ever since she ran into Athena, she thinks of the day she saw her mother. She had been walking back from Sally Jackson's house when Percy was still missing. Athena was babbling nonsense about her city being attacked and needing to return home, going back and forth from Athena to Minerva. Annabeth calls her Minerva when she didn't answer, and the goddess freaks out, saying not to call her that. The Romans must be destroyed. She once held victory in her hand, and now it's been stolen. Athena gives Annabeth a coin with an owl on it and tells her to avenge her by finding the Mark of Athena. Annabeth begs Athena for help to find Percy, but Athena says he means nothing to her and that Annabeth has already failed her. As Annabeth is reminiscing, things start to piece together. She thinks she knows what the Mark of Athena is and what was stolen, but hopes she was wrong. But before she can think anymore, there's a knock on her door and Frank enters. Frank asks Annabeth if she can explain the Chinese handcuffs. Frank doesn't like not knowing, and Annabeth is the only person he felt comfortable enough to ask. Annabeth is touched by this and agrees. Annabeth then pulls up a diagram of the handcuffs on her laptop and explains the physics behind it. When pulled, the woven threads get tighter, but when pushed together, it expands. Frank thanks Annabeth, and Annabeth tells Frank that Leo doesn't mean harm. When he's nervous, he tends to use humor as a defense mechanism. Frank tells Annabeth it's more than that. The fact that Leo can summon fire makes Frank uncomfortable. Frank then asks Annabeth if she can help him with another problem, his Achilles heel. But before Frank can explain about his firewood, the dinner bell rings. The next morning, by the time Annabeth, Piper, and Hazel are ready to leave, Leo, Jason, and Frank have already left. Annabeth asks Percy what he's going to do, and Percy says he's going to jump in the harbor and talk to the local Nereids and see if they can help with the creatures in Atlanta. The three girls then set off. As they're walking around the park, Annabeth thinks about Nico. She's always had mixed feelings about him, as she suspected that he may have a crush on her. And he had always made her uneasy, but she didn't want him to die, and they're running out of time. Piper then sees a woman sitting at a table in the park and takes off after her. Annabeth and Hazel follow, and when they approach, Annabeth instantly notices how beautiful the woman is. It's Piper's mom, Aphrodite. Aphrodite then invites them to tea. Annabeth then asks if she's Aphrodite or Venus, and Aphrodite says both. Unlike other gods, she's the same in Greek and Roman. Love is love, so she's not suffering from split personality disorder. Aphrodite offers some fashion advice, much to Piper's embarrassment, and then Piper asks what's the real reason she's here. And Aphrodite says she's come to help, as Hera is currently hiding and Annabeth isn't talking to Athena. This shocks Hazel and Piper, and Annabeth says it was just an argument and doesn't want to get into it. Aphrodite says the Romans sidelined Athena and she never forgave them for it. Annabeth then asks if the Mark of Athena leads to a statue, and Aphrodite says indeed it does, but in order to find it, first they'll have to get the map, which is at Fort Sumter. Aphrodite then leaves and our heroes see some eagles. The Romans have found them, so they race to find the map. But they don't quite make it there. Their path is blocked by Octavian and Roman soldiers. Piper tries to explain everything that happened was an accident, but Octavian says he can't hear her. They've put wax in their ears to avoid her charm speak. Octavian says to drop their weapons. Annabeth then comes up with a brilliant plan. She tosses her dagger into the harbor, where Percy currently is. This confuses Octavian, but before he can figure it out, a giant wave erupts and washes the Romans into the water, where they're trapped by a whirlpool. And Percy is standing there with Annabeth's dagger. Annabeth is so overcome with gratitude, she blurts out, "I love you." They then race back to the Argo II and steer it towards Fort Sumter. Piper sends an iris message to Jason telling him to head back. Soon enough, they can see Jason, Frank, and Leo in the sky, and Percy can't help but notice that Jason looks a lot like a blonde Superman when he's flying. Before anyone can comment on that, Coach Hedge fires on the Romans, but misses and almost hits our heroes. Frank drops Leo, and Jason tries to catch him, but the three end up crashing behind Fort Sumter. The Argo II lands, and Annabeth tells everyone to defend the ship while she finds their friends and the map. When Annabeth gets to the fort, Jason, Leo, and Frank are already fighting, and Annabeth tells Jason to retreat and get the others aboard and leave her behind. She then races off to find the map. She enters a room and the door seals shut. The room is then flooded with spiders, and Annabeth is absolutely frozen in terror. Then she hears the voice of Gaia telling her that soon she will meet the Weaver. Then Annabeth hears a new voice, the voice of her mother saying to avenge her. Then a burning image of an owl appears and burns away all the spiders. The symbol then fades and appears on a plug at the end of a cannon. Annabeth forces herself to move, and inside the cannon is a map, a small bronze disc. Annabeth is about to leave, but her path is blocked by Raina. Annabeth begs Raina to let her go. Everything that happened was Gaia's fault, and they can't let her win. Raina knows this, but Octavian is leaving her no choice. Someone must pay. Annabeth says she can fix this feud between the camps. She just needs to follow the Mark of Athena to Rome. Raina says that if they sail to Rome, Octavian will attack Camp Half-Blood, the location given to them by Annabeth when she was trying to win their trust. Annabeth feels despair. She can't let her home be destroyed, but she has no other choice. Annabeth begs Raina to delay Octavian for as long as possible, just long enough for Annabeth to retrieve what was stolen. Raina lets Annabeth pass, but says the next time they meet, they'll be enemies. Annabeth then makes it back to the Argo II, and the ship sets off for Rome, where the Romans would never follow them as it's forbidden. Annabeth just hopes she can find the Mark of Athena before Camp Half-Blood is destroyed. Annabeth then tells Leo that Percy found some information out from the Nereids, that they should seek the help of Chiron's cousins. So Annabeth gives Leo the coordinates, and then they set off for that location. Leo says that for now they need to travel by sea. The flight mechanism was damaged in the battle with the Romans. That is fine with Percy, but not so much with Hazel, who gets seasick. Jason and Percy are pretty exhausted from defending the ship from the Romans and getting them out of Charleston by summoning waves and winds. So Piper, Annabeth, and Frank help them to their cabins below deck. So that leaves just Hazel and Leo. Leo gives Hazel some tips on how to not be so seasick. Hazel tells Leo to go easy on Frank. Leo makes him nervous, and Leo doesn't understand how he can make a guy who can turn into an elephant nervous. Hazel once again brings up just how much Leo looks like Sammy, and finally Leo asks just who this Sammy guy is. Hazel says she might be able to show Leo with a flashback, like she did that one time with Frank. Leo is hesitant, but Hazel says she wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. She knows her and Leo are connected, but not exactly sure how. Leo says okay. He takes Hazel's hand and the whole world dissolves into a flashback. They arrive at Hazel's old school. Hazel is sitting on the playground trying to eat her lunch when the school bully Rufus comes over and calls her a witch child. He then demands that she hand over her lunch. Hazel, not wanting any problems, does just that, and then Rufus smashes it on the ground and demands that Hazel give him a diamond. Hazel, despite her best efforts, can't control her powers and a diamond pops up. But before Rufus can pick it up, Sammy comes strolling in, acting as a director, pretending that the whole scene on the playground is a movie set. This gets Hazel and everyone to laugh, embarrassing Rufus. Sammy then scoops up the diamond, much to Hazel's horror. Rufus is just about to punch Sammy when the bell rings. Hazel thanks Sammy and says he shouldn't have touched the diamond. They're dangerous. Sammy says not to worry, he won't sell it, so he can't be cursed. Hazel thanks Sammy for being there for her, and Sammy says he'll always be there for her. Leo is absolutely shocked by the entire scene because Sammy does indeed look like a Leo point two. The scene then dissolves, but this isn't Hazel's flashback, it's Leo's. There's a house, and on the porch is an old man holding a baby. The man says, Hazel, it seems they've run out of time. Then a woman comes out of the house to greet the old man and the baby, and when Leo sees her, he breaks down in sobs. It's his mother, and the old man is his great-grandfather, and the baby is Leo himself. Hazel then puts it all together. Leo's great-grandfather is Sammy. Sammy then tells baby Leo to tell Hazel he's sorry. Once she moved to Alaska, he sold the diamond to move to Texas, and because of the curse, he was never able to see her again. Sammy then tells Leo that when he sees Hazel, to tell her hello for him. Leo and Hazel then wake up, and Leo looks at Hazel and says, "Hello, Hazel Levesque." But before Hazel can respond, the ship is attacked by a giant monster, a giant shrimpzilla. The tendrils attack the ship, knocking Percy backwards and grabbing Piper by the leg. Frank is knocked overboard and Leo looks to Hazel and says, "Open the box that says do not open." Inside the box is vials of Greek fire. Hazel looks at Leo and says, "You are absolutely insane." But Leo says there's no other choice and to chuck it at the monster. But before they can, they are snatched up by a tentacle. Leo says to trust him. He's got a plan. When the monster drops them, Hazel needs to throw the vials as far as possible. Leo then summons fire and gets the monster to drop them. Hazel chucks the vials and there's an explosion. And then Leo hits the water. Right before he blacks out, he swears he sees someone that looks like Chiron. Leo wakes up in a cage, underwater, with Frank. He asks Frank where the others are, and Frank says he doesn't know. It's just Leo, Frank, and Hazel down here. And Hazel got taken away by the fish horse guys a little while ago. Leo can sense that Frank is angry at him, and Leo figures Frank must have seen Leo holding hands with Hazel. Leo then explains what happened, how Sammy was his great-grandfather. Leo tells Frank that he's not interested in Hazel like that, and at this, Frank's anger starts to fade. Leo then decides they need to come up with a plan for escape, and asks how they're breathing underwater, and Frank says the fish horse guys tapped their heads with daggers, so it must be some kind of magic. Leo asks if Frank can transform, and Frank says unfortunately he can't for some reason. Leo tries to summon fire and he's able to, but it quickly goes out. But at this, Frank absolutely freaks out. Leo apologizes and says he understands being afraid of fire, but Frank says it's way more than that. But before he can explain his firewood problem, they are interrupted by the fish horse guys. They have come to interrogate Leo and Frank. They separate them, Frank with Bythos and Leo with Aphthos. Leo asks what they are, and Aphthos says they are fish centaurs, cousins of Chiron. Leo is then taken on a tour of a giant underwater city. Aphthos says they train heroes here, just like Camp Half-Blood. Aphthos then tells Leo to explain everything, so Leo does, starting with the Grand Canyon to present. Aphthos believes him as he's a good judge of character, but he needed to be absolutely sure as this city's location is secret, and it was a little weird when Leo showed up with his friends on a Greek battleship being chased by Keto's monster. Leo asks about the ship, and Aphthos says that it's fine, it was a little bit damaged, but not destroyed. The monster retreated as soon as it got a face full of Greek fire. Leo then meets up with Hazel, and Leo puts together Frank's firewood problem from remembering the stories told at camp, but Hazel says it's not really her place to say. Leo then feels really bad for making Frank feel so uneasy. Leo then remembers the prophecy of 7, to storm or fire the world must fall. Leo always figured he was the fire part, but what if Frank had something to do with it as well? They then meet back up with Frank, and Aphrodite says they are free to go and to tell Percy thank you for bringing their attention to the creatures in Atlanta. They will handle it. Leo asks if they want to meet Percy, but Aphrodite says no, it's best for them not to interact with children of Poseidon. Aphrodite then tells Leo that he will need to stick close to Hazel and Frank once they reach Rome. He then gifts them with a basket of brownies and a letter of recommendation for Annabeth, who she should give to the god Tiberinus, who will help her seek out the Mark of Athena. And then they are sent on their way. While all this is happening to Frank, Leo, and Hazel, the remaining Half-Bloods were making sure the Argo II didn't sink. Percy willed water out of the boat. Annabeth fixed the boat to the best of her abilities, but without Leo to fix the bigger issues, they're stuck. Annabeth sent a message to Camp Half-Blood to warn them about the Romans. Chiron told her that Tyson and Ella arrived safely, and they will take measures to get ready for the attack. Piper tried to find Leo, Hazel, and Frank by looking into her dagger, but no luck. And Piper can't help but feel useless. Her charm speak and dagger was useless against the shrimp monster, and now she's of no help either. Piper is feeling utterly hopeless when Leo, Frank, and Hazel make their way back onto the boat, and everyone is super glad that they're not dead. Leo explains everything that happened to them, and Percy is happy that the sea creatures will get help, but is kinda upset that the seahorse centaurs don't want to meet him. Leo gets the boat working and says they should arrive in Rome by tomorrow. Annabeth tells everyone what the Mark of Athena is, the Athena Parthenon, one of the most famous Greek statues that used to protect the city of Athens. It's a giant statue of Athena holding the goddess Nike, which would explain why Athena kept mumbling about holding victory in her hand. The statue disappeared several thousand years ago when Rome invaded the city. Annabeth believes that if she can retrieve the statue, it could heal the rift between Romans and Greeks and heal the hatred that Athena has for Romans. But it's not that easy. No child of Athena has ever found it, and Annabeth believes that whatever is guarding it has to do with spiders. Percy says they'll help her, but Annabeth says no, she needs to do this on her own. But they'll worry about that when they get to Rome. Percy says no matter what, he believes in her. The next morning, they've reached the opening to the Mediterranean, better known as the Pillars of Hercules. Between the pillars is an island, and on the island a man, Hercules, the most powerful demigod to ever live. They decide to send a small group to go talk with him to hopefully convince him to let them pass. They decide to send Jason, as he's a son of Jupiter, and Hercules is a son of Zeus, so they're kinda like brothers. They also decide on Piper for her charm speak. Jason flies ashore and they meet with Hercules, now a god. Jason asks if they can pass one brother to another, and Hercules says sure, but first they need to complete a quest for him. They need to travel over the hill and find the river god Achelous. All they have to do is chop off his other horn and bring it back to Hercules by sundown. But they can't ask for help from their other friends, and if they fail, Achelous will kill them and Hercules will crush the Argo II. So with that cheerful thought, Piper and Jason set off to find Achelous. Soon they find a pond, and a bull with a human's face appears. The man Piper had seen in her dagger, the god Achelous, and he's missing one horn. In ancient Greek, Hercules chopped it off and it became the first cornucopia. Achelous warns Piper about being with a son of Zeus. The reason Hercules cut off his horn was over a fight with a woman. She chose Hercules, who would eventually murder her, over Achelous, who would have been a faithful husband. Piper apologizes. They don't want to fight him, but they have no choice. So maybe he could willingly hand the horn over? Achelous apologizes. He doesn't want to fight either, but he won't hand his horn over, so he sends a wave of water towards them. Piper is pulled into the water, and Jason is about to summon lightning when he realizes that he'll shock Piper. Then Jason is pulled under. Piper tries to reason with the gods, saying that they promise Hercules won't get his horn. They agree, he's a terrible person, but Achelous won't hear of it. Piper then tries another tactic. She starts to flirt with the river god, getting him to come closer, and when he does, she jumps on his back and pulls her dagger to his throat, demanding that he release Jason, and he does. Jason shoots out of the river onto the shore. Piper then chops off the god's horn and leaps for shore. Jason catches her in a gust of wind and they make a break for it. As they're running away, Piper looks back and tells the god she promises that Hercules won't get the horn. However, she still feels absolutely horrible about what they had to do to the god. Piper then tells Jason she has a plan, and they head back to Hercules. When they get back to Hercules, Piper makes Hercules promise first that he'll let their ship pass safely, and once he does, Hercules demands the horn, and Piper says, no, you don't deserve it, you're a despicable hero. Hercules then goes to attack, but before he can, Piper uses her new cornucopia to bury the god in hams. Jason and Piper then fly back to the Argo II, which Leo has managed to get in the air again, and Jason summons a gust of wind to blow them through the channel. And Percy summons a wave to knock Hercules back down once he managed to dig his way out of the hams. Percy is glad to feel useful, as he's been feeling pretty lousy lately. He got run out of Atlanta by evil sea gods, failed to fight off the shrimp monster, and Chiron's cousins didn't even want to meet him. And then he had to wait back while Jason and Piper got to meet Hercules, even if he is a jerk. The sea is his domain. He should feel more useful, so he was at least glad that he could help them escape. As the Argo II continues to sail on, their ship is attacked by a different monster every hour. That night, Percy has another nightmare. He dreams he is in a dark cavern. He then sees the twin giants, Otis and Ephialtes, but they're not alone. They're talking to someone else, a female voice, but not all human. The woman talks in garbled hisses. She asks the giants for updates on the 7 demigods, and the giants say they should be in Rome in 1 day's time, if they can get past Golden Boy. The giants tell the lady that if the girl makes it to the cavern, to remember that Gaia wants her alive. She says we shall see, and then Percy wakes up. Percy gets Annabeth and tells her about his dream. Annabeth makes Percy swear not to tell the others. The cave is the location of the Mark of Athena, and the lady is the monster that Annabeth will have to face, but she needs to do it alone. Percy then senses something and yells at Leo to stop the ship. Leo stops it just in time before they would have collided with another ship, but this ship is not friendly. Before they know it, their ship is invaded by dolphin warriors. Percy and Annabeth do their best to defend the ship, but they are quickly outnumbered and the rest are dragged out of their cabins and tied up. The dolphin soldiers then part for their leader, who appears to be fully human, and he's dressed in all gold. Percy then remembers what the giant said about Golden Boy. Percy asks who he is and what he wants, and the man introduces him as Chrysaor, Percy's half-brother. Percy says his accent sounds familiar and if they've met before, and Chrysaor says no, but you have met my mother, Medusa. Chrysaor tells Percy that they've trespassed in his territory, and because of this, everything they have is now his. Annabeth says you can't do this, and Chrysaor says he can do whatever he wants. His soldiers are trained to perfection, to which Percy says, they're dolphins, bro. Chrysaor says an unfortunate setback. A few millennia ago, they ran into a god and unfortunately got turned into half-human, half-creatures. But they're not afraid of anything. At this, the dolphin soldiers say, well, one thing. And Chrysaor says, well, one thing, but he's not here right now. Percy tries to defeat Chrysaor in battle, but his sword skills are vastly outmatched and Riptide is knocked from his hand. Percy, in desperation, needs to come up with another plan. Jason is knocked unconscious, Piper, Annabeth, Hazel, and Leo are tied up, and Frank is missing. Percy figures he must have turned into a swarm of bees and is hiding somewhere. Percy then thinks, and he realizes who the dolphin warriors are afraid of. Percy then tells Chrysaor that he attacked the wrong ship. The captain of this ship is a god, who only appears when he wishes, the god Dionysus. A wave of pure terror sweeps through the dolphin warriors. Percy says if they're not released, Dionysus' madness will envelop the ship. Hazel, Piper, and Annabeth, realizing what Percy is doing, then pretend to go insane. Percy says if they don't leave, Dionysus will turn them into full dolphins. Chrysaor says this is ridiculous and Percy is lying. And Percy says no. He then points to where Frank is hiding and says, behold! And nothing happens. He points again and says, behold! And then Frank realizes what Percy wants him to do, and Frank stumbles out of his hiding place, pretending to go insane, and transforms into a dolphin. The dolphin warriors scream and flee the ship, leaving Chrysaor all alone. Percy has managed to free Annabeth, Hazel, and Piper. Chrysaor says this isn't over and then flees the ship into the water. Annabeth says they should burn the ship that he came on, but Percy says no, I have a different idea. He then takes Piper's cornucopia and fills the ships with Diet Coke, Dionysus' favorite drink. They then flood the ship, offering it as a tribute. All the Diet Cokes and jewels aboard are offered to Dionysus. The Argo II then continues to sail towards Rome. However, this time they decide to fly to avoid the sea in hopes of avoiding any more obstacles. Since the ship is flying, Percy leaves Jason in charge of defending it and goes to take a nap. Percy then dreams he's back at Camp Half-Blood, and the sleeping face of Gaia appears on Half-Blood Hill. Gaia tells Percy to take one last look because when she wakes, she will make sure there is nothing left of camp. Gaia tells Percy to enjoy Tartarus, and then the camp goes up in flames, and Percy wakes up. Jason tells Percy that they've reached Rome. Leo sets the Argo II down in the park in hopes that the mist will disguise it as a large pigeon. The group then decides to split up. Annabeth and Percy will follow the map to the entrance to the Mark of Athena, and Hazel, Frank, and Leo are going to try and find Nico's location. Jason and Piper decide to keep watch on the ship. Piper tells Hazel that if they find Nico, not to go alone and to come back and get them, as they will all need to battle the giants together. Percy says that's a good idea and to meet back here at 3 o'clock, and if anything changes to send an Iris message. Everyone then sets off. Annabeth and Percy walk through Rome, and Percy thinks under different circumstances this would have been a nice date. They then arrive at the Tiber River, the beginning location to the Mark of Athena. As they wait for the god Tiberinus to show up, they decide to have lunch at a nearby cafe. Annabeth can tell that Percy is worried, and tells him that he can't shoulder the whole responsibility of the quest himself. That's why there's 7 of them. And when the time comes, Percy will need to let Annabeth search for the Athena Parthenon on her own. Percy says he doesn't want to lose her again, and Annabeth says you have to trust me. They are then interrupted by a man and a woman coming up to their table. The man is the god Tibernus and asks Annabeth if she has the proper letter of recommendation. Annabeth hands over the letter. Tibernus says all is in order and that they should begin. Percy and Annabeth then say goodbye. Percy heads back to the Argo II, and Tibernus takes Annabeth on his motorcycle to begin the quest for the Mark of Athena. Tibernus takes Annabeth to a marble building. Tibernus says her quest starts below the building. She must descend into the buried city to begin her quest. Annabeth then heads down the steps to begin her quest. And for the first time, she realizes how alone she is. She hasn't felt this terrified since she ran away when she was 7. She's always had her friends on quests, but now she's completely alone. But she keeps moving forward, not having a choice. She needs to succeed. The fate of Camp Half-Blood and the world depended on it. And most importantly, her mom needed her. At the bottom of the steps is an old wooden door, and Annabeth walks through. As soon as Annabeth touches the door, the Mark of Athena, an owl, burns brightly on the door. Inside is a very ancient-looking room with mosaic tiles and old crates. Inside the crates are spools of string and plastic swords. Annabeth continues examining the room, and the only exit she can find besides the door she came in through is a hole in the floor. Annabeth peers down, but it's too dark. She can only hear running water. Annabeth gets frustrated, comparing herself to others. Percy could simply summon the water, Frank and Jason could fly down, Hazel could find another way, and Leo could build something. Annabeth doesn't have amazing powers, but then Annabeth hears a voice in her head reminding her that that isn't true. She has her intelligence. That's right, she is smart, and she can do this on her own. She then remembers the string and the swords and makes a rope ladder. She also packs some extra string in her backpack just in case. She then descends into the hole in the floor. Annabeth lands in ankle-deep water and figures she must be in a sewer. She uses her dagger to provide light and continues moving forward. Annabeth then has a scary thought. What if she's back in the labyrinth? What if the labyrinth was only destroyed in North America? Or the labyrinth can regenerate like monsters? Annabeth decides either way it doesn't matter, she needs to continue moving forward. But first she ties a piece of string to the rope ladder so she'll know which way she came from. As Annabeth is walking, she sees a hole in the wall near the floor. She peers in and sees a room with an altar, so she decides to check it out. She breaks the hole open more and drops down into the room. When she lands, she holds back a scream. The room is littered with bones. Annabeth approaches the altar. There's a statue holding a dagger and a torch. Annabeth figures it must be some sort of test. Annabeth then hears a spooky voice and decides it's time to leave. She turns around, but the hole is gone. And then the room is filled with spirits telling her that female demigods are not welcome. And even worse, Greek female demigods are especially not welcome. This is the throne of Mithras, and no one is allowed to view his secrets. Annabeth panics. She doesn't know much about Mithras, so she improvises. Fake it till you make it. She states she already knows the secrets of Mithras, and she uses clues in the rooms to back up her statements. This absolutely shocks the ghosts, but they still must kill her. Annabeth says they will let her pass, or Annabeth will summon the power to destroy the room. The ghosts do not believe this, but Annabeth has studied the room's layout, and as she's been speaking, she took note of the stress fractures in the wall. She strikes one of the cracks and the room starts to collapse. But before Annabeth is crushed to death, she runs with full force at the wall and breaks through. But now she's in a free fall. And when she lands, she instantly knows that she broke her ankle. She collapses to the floor and almost blacks out from the pain. Annabeth lays there and forces herself to calm down. She slows her breathing and makes herself focus. She takes in the surroundings and decides she's not in immediate danger. She's in a corridor. She then takes some ambrosia, which helps the pain, but her ankle will need more time to fully heal. So she takes some broken wood she sees on the floor and uses the string in her backpack to make a splint. Using the wall for support, Annabeth hobbles her way down the corridor. As she's walking, limping, she thinks she's being followed. The corridor then begins to fill with spider webs. Annabeth forces herself not to panic. She knew there would be spiders. And this meant she was getting closer to the end, and the woman with the hissing voice. The the one the spirits had called the Weaver. Annabeth turns into a doorway, and in the room she sees a door with the glowing mark of an owl on the other side. The only issue between her and the door is a 50-foot chasm. The hissing gets louder. The spiders are getting closer. Annabeth refuses to die. Annabeth finds a torch and lights it and sets the cobwebs on fire, buying her some time. She then sees 2 planks across the chasm, but they're too thin to walk on, especially with a broken ankle. So then she comes up with a plan. She takes the string out of her backpack and starts to weave a bridge. The more she weaves, the closer she gets to the other side. Annabeth has never weaved before and wonders how she knows how to do this, but figures it's because of Athena. Weaving is one of the goddess's many skills. Annabeth never thought it particularly useful until now. The spiders have started to regroup, so once Annabeth is safely across, she burns the makeshift bridge, trapping the spiders on the other side. Annabeth then walks through the door, and on the other side is a cavern. The cavern that Percy saw in his dreams, and it's covered in spider webs. And right in the center of the room is a 40-foot statue, the Athena Parthenon, also covered in webs. Annabeth then realizes the webs are the only thing holding the statue and the room together. Below them is a dark chasm. Annabeth has absolutely no idea how she's supposed to get the statue out of here without collapsing the room. Annabeth then notices tapestries in the room, and they're depicting moments from her life. Annabeth asks how this is possible, and then a hissing voice from above answers. The voice has been watching Annabeth, seen Annabeth in her dreams, and the voice is impressed. Annabeth is the only child of Athena to pass all the tests. Annabeth calls the voice Arachne, the Weaver, who was turned into the first spider. Arachne then shows herself, a horrible monster, half spider, half woman. Arachne was once a beautiful woman and a very talented weaver, but she was too full of herself and said she was even better than Athena. She then challenged Athena to a competition, and when Arachne lost, Athena cursed her to be the monster that she is today. This is why spiders have been after children of Athena for all these years. Arachne says she didn't lose, and Athena just couldn't admit defeat. Annabeth says it doesn't matter. She's taking back the Athena Parthenon. Arachne says that will not happen, as she is going to devour Annabeth, but she'll make a nice tapestry depicting her death. Meanwhile, while Annabeth is underground fighting for her life, Leo, Frank, and Hazel are above ground looking for Nico. After roaming Rome, that was not intentional, for hours going in circles, they eventually end up at a church and blend in with the tour group and go inside. Hazel can sense a secret passageway and thinks it will lead to Nico as she can sense him. As they're looking, Leo gets the sense that someone is watching him, but decides it must be nothing. Leo then finds the passageway, a trap door in the floor. When Leo touches it, he can feel the gears and wills them to open. Hazel decides to go down first and scope it out, so Leo and Frank wait for her to return. Frank then confronts Leo about knowing about his firewood problem. Leo says he would never do anything to harm Frank, and Frank believes him, but he just can't trust fire, especially after his house burnt down and his mom died in a fire in the war. At this, Leo says, wow, that's something we have in common. Frank and Leo then start to understand each other just a little bit better. But before they can talk more, the tourists have started walking towards them, chanting, "Kill Valdez! The Eldians are back!" Frank and Leo decide it's probably safer underground and go down the hole. When Leo lets go of the trap door, it seals shut. They find Hazel and explain what happened. Hazel says she found a door but can't get it open. Leo looks at it and is seriously impressed. This is a Greek design, not Roman. Leo opens the door by entering the secret code, which he figures out is the number for pi. Inside is a seriously cool workshop. Along the wall are armored mannequins made of gold. Leo then realizes that this must be the workshop of Archimedes, one of the most famous sons of Hephaestus. The Romans must have stole his inventions. Leo then finds Archimedes' sphere, one of the greatest inventions of all time. Apparently it can do anything, but no one was able to figure out how to get it work. It required a passcode. If Leo just had a bit of time, he's sure he could figure it out. But Leo is out of time. The Eldians have taken control of the mannequins and are coming to kill our heroes. Frank and Hazel are knocked unconscious, and Leo manages to barricade himself in a room, leading the spirits away from Frank and Hazel. But there's a third one Leo didn't see, and Hazel and Frank are about to be killed. Leo is officially out of time. If only he could get the sphere to work, but it needs a code. Leo then remembers what Nemesis said, a problem you can't solve. Leo then breaks open the fortune cookie. Leo gets the code and unlocks the sphere. He takes control of the workshop and destroys the robot mannequins in a truly spectacular show. Hazel and Frank then wake up and Leo gives them both huge hugs, glad that they're alive. Hazel says they need to find Nico now as she can sense him close by. But what Hazel was sensing was Nico's Stygian iron sword. This was a trap. They were led here. They then hear the voice of Gaia. She forms a face in the dirt. Leo says she failed, but Gaia says that's not the case. Her plan was to separate them. She shows them visions of Annabeth as she faces Arachne, and Piper and Jason, who will soon fall into her trap as well. Leo then shoots fire at her face and Gaia disappears. Hazel says they need to get out of here now. Leo has a plan, but it's going to require all of them. It seems everyone is in quite the predicament. Well, everyone except Piper and Jason, who are having a very nice picnic aboard the Argo II. But hey, it's Jason's birthday, and doesn't he deserve some happiness? I think so, but Jason can't help but feel like a failure. He was raised to be a leader, and in the 7 he's an equal, so he's not sure how he fits in. Plus he spent most of the time knocked out, which is true. How many times has Jason been knocked out now? 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th time was in Kansas, and then again when Chrysor attacked, so 6 times? But hey, he's done a lot of good too. They never would have made it this far without him, so Piper reminds him of that. Percy then arrives back. However, Leo, Hazel, and Frank still haven't returned. Our heroes get worried, so Piper looks in her dagger. They see the Romans, who are getting ready to attack Camp Half-Blood. Then they see Nico, who's running out of time. The dagger shows them the location, so Piper, Percy, and Jason rush off to save the son of Hades. They find the location quickly, a set of stone steps that lead underground. Piper then freezes. This is the location that her dagger showed her where her, Jason, and Percy end up drowning. Jason says maybe the future changed. Besides, they don't really have a choice. They need to go rescue Nico. So they enter the room. And good news, there's no water. But Percy says there should be. He can sense the ocean, but yet there's no water. Jason then recognizes the room. There's one just like it at Camp Jupiter. It's a shrine dedicated to water nymphs. Once the shrine is built, the nymphs are bound to it, but usually they're outside in sunlight filled with water. However, this one is dry and underground. Not a great location for a nature spirit. Piper wonders what happened to the nymphs, and then they hear a hissing voice. A ghost of a withered old woman appears, and she says maybe they're waiting for revenge. 8 others then appear as well. These nymphs were once the ones who raised baby Zeus. They were promised honor, but that was in Greece. When the Romans came to power, they were invited here. And all was good for a while, but then Rome fell, and they were forgotten. Percy says maybe they can help them, but the nymphs just laugh, and then they disappear, and the room seals shut and starts to fill with water as dark as oil. The room fills fast, and Percy quickly learns he can't breathe in this water. And it gets worse. The water is draining their life force. Piper then comes up with an idea. They need to overwhelm the nymphs with fresh water. Maybe her cornucopia can produce it. They all need to channel their power into it. Percy needs to think of the sea, and Jason needs to think of rainstorms. And it's working, but too well. The room is filling even faster. Soon the water is up to the ceiling. Piper says not to stop, even if they go under. And they do. Right before they go under, Piper says, "I love you" to Jason. But just as quickly as the room filled, it empties. Piper and Percy are coughing, but Jason isn't waking up. That's the 7th time. So Percy says, "Let me help." He then wills the water out of Jason's lungs, and Jason comes to, coughing up the rest. The nymphs then come back and say they didn't know such selflessness existed in demigods. They thank Piper. They've now been cured of their hatred, and they are free to leave this location. A door then opens up, and the nymphs say it will lead them to the giants and Nico. So our heroes head off to face the giants and hopefully rescue the son of Hades. They enter a room the size of a warehouse, and it's filled with monsters in cages and weapons of every kind. Then they see it. the jar, with Nico inside. Surely it's a trap. But like always, they don't have a choice. They make it about halfway when the ceiling opens and the floor starts rising. Soon they're in a Coliseum, and the twin giants are waiting for them, Otis and Ephialtes. The giants greet them, saying they're just in time for the main event. Percy demands that they let Nico go. They then tip the jar over and Nico spills out. But the giants say it doesn't matter. Everything is in place for their big show. They don't need their bait anymore. Nico then starts to stir, and Percy hopes he can gain enough consciousness to move out of the way before the fighting starts. Percy gets the giants talking, who tells them the others' predicaments and how Gaia will wake in 1 month, on August 1st. Nico slowly starts to crawl away. The giants mess with a complicated-looking remote that controls their big spectacle. Percy asks what happens if they refuse to be a part of the show, and the giants say they'll die an even more painful death. So Jason, Piper, and Percy charge the giants. And things go wrong immediately. The giants vanish and reappear, and the Coliseum comes to life. Monsters are released, walls collapse, and the ground is made of lava. Basically, every horrible thing you could possibly imagine. Piper manages to get to Nico's side, Jason charges Otis, and Percy gets stopped by a Hydra. Percy dodges the heads and acids and sees a grenade launcher. He heads over there and blows the Hydra up. Jason deflects a spear with wind thrown by Otis, and it impales Ephialtes. And then Percy fires another rocket and the roof falls on the two giants. Jason runs to Piper, who got knocked down in the explosion, but is thankfully okay. But the fight isn't over. The giants are reforming. However, Percy has managed to get to the control panel and slices it with Riptide, so no more surprises. Just our heroes versus giants. Percy tells the giants that it doesn't matter if they don't have a god on their side, they will still win. But then a platform lowers, a man is standing on it, Bacchus, and Percy has never been so happy to see Mr. D. It seems Bacchus appreciated the offering that Percy made to him, the ship filled with gold and Diet Cokes. Bacchus does prefer Pepsi, but it was close enough. However, Bacchus isn't here to help. Yet. If Percy can impress him, then he'll help our heroes. Bacchus then sits back and enjoys the show. Percy is seriously mad, and so are the giants. They call Bacchus a coward. It's at this moment that Percy understands why Luke became so spiteful of the gods. But with nothing else to do, Percy and Jason face down the giants again. Percy then realizes something. They can't win separately. They need to work together. So both Jason and Percy fight Otis. Jason summons a wind gust and pushes Otis into the water, where he explodes into dust. Otis tries to reform, but Percy has him trapped in a whirlpool. Then Ephialtes joins the battle. Percy and Jason slash, but it's no use. Percy is knocked aside, and Jason takes a nasty slash down the front. Just when all hope seems lost, the Argo II appears overhead and starts sending cannonballs at the giants. Bacchus then deems our heroes worthy and joins the battle. He taps the giants on the nose and they burst into dust. The Argo II lands. Bacchus then tells Percy that he may want to head to the parking lot behind the Emmanuel building. And then the god leaves. Leo, Hazel, and Frank exit from the Argo II, and Percy is thrilled they're alive. Leo then explains everything that happened to them and how they escaped. With Hazel's help and the help of the Archimedes sphere, they drilled a hole to the surface. Frank turned into a weasel and climbed out and found Coach Hedge and sent the Argo II towards them to rescue them. Percy asks if they've seen Annabeth, and Leo explains the vision that Gaia showed him, Annabeth with a hurt leg facing down Arachne. So the 6 demigods of the prophecy plus Nico hop on the Argo II to set off to help Annabeth. They figure with no other leads, they better head to the parking lot that Bacchus told them about. On board, everyone tends to their wounds. Jason and Percy say they make a pretty good team, and even Leo and Frank can't stop complimenting each other. But Hazel breaks up the love fest when she helps a limping Nico over. Nico apologizes to Percy for pretending not to know him. But Hades made Nico promise not to tell the camps about each other until the time was right. Nico also reveals that before he was captured, he found the doors of death. There's 2 sides. The one in the mortal world is in Greece, in the house of Hades, and the other side is in Tartarus. And in order to close the doors of death, you need to be on both sides. But not even gods go to Tartarus. Nico explains how he barely made it out with his insanity intact. Jason says there has to be a way. Percy says they will figure it out later. Now they need to rescue Annabeth. Leo says how? There's a parking lot in their way. Percy then turns to Leo and says, do you have any more explosives? As our heroes prepare to rescue Annabeth, Annabeth needs to figure out how to beat Arachne. Annabeth should be afraid, but she's actually so scared she's not scared anymore. Her fear dial has exploded and she just can't feel fear anymore. So Annabeth does what she does best. She thinks. She needs to trick Arachne. In the myths, Arachne's downfall was her pride. So Annabeth decides to use that against her. So Annabeth starts complimenting her, asking her questions about her tapestries. Arachne says Annabeth is only delaying her death, and Annabeth says no, that's not what she's doing. It's just a shame no one will ever see how beautiful these tapestries are. Annabeth says they belong in a museum, or perhaps Olympus, which Annabeth just so happens to be in charge of redesigning. This gets Arachne's attention. Sure, killing Annabeth would be good revenge, but nothing would compare to the look on Athena's face when she sees Arachne's work displayed on Olympus. Arachne asks Annabeth if she would truly go against her mother, and Annabeth says sure. The last time they saw each other, Athena called her a failure. Annabeth, of course, is only saying this to survive, but she still hopes that her mother can't hear her. The chasm then shakes, and Arachne says to be careful. Her webbing is the only thing holding this room together, and if it breaks, Annabeth will take a one-way trip to Tartarus. And that would be bad because now Arachne wants Annabeth alive so she can get her tapestries on Olympus. Annabeth supposes she can pull a few strings, but first Arachne must pass a test. Arachne says anything. Annabeth then pulls up the design of the Chinese handcuffs on her laptop and asks if Arachne can weave it. Arachne says it's so small, but Annabeth says no, it must be bigger, big enough to impress the gods. Arachne says it would require a lot of silk. Annabeth says she can use the silk on the Athena Parthenon. Arachne says no, not possible. So Annabeth says, I guess just kill me then, no tapestries on Olympus for you. This gets Arachne to agree, so she begins weaving the design. So Annabeth sits back and watches. She can feel the ambrosia working on her leg. And as Arachne begins to unweave the statue, it begins to glow. However, even if Annabeth's plan works, she has no way to contact her friends. Annabeth then notices a crack on the ground growing and encourages Arachne to hurry. Arachne finishes and demands her reward. Annabeth says first she must check. Annabeth crawls through and tells Arachne there's a flaw. Arachne says impossible, and Annabeth says no, really, take a look inside. So Arachne crawls in, but when she does, her abdomen gets stuck. Annabeth declares the work finished. She calls it Chinese spider cuffs. Arachne then realizes she's been tricked and starts rolling around in anger. Annabeth says to stop, she'll bring down the room, but the monster continues thrashing. Arachne then calls her children and Annabeth is being swarmed by spiders. All seems hopeless when the Argo II blasts through the roof. Cars rain down into the cavern and Arachne falls into the dark pit. Percy calls to Annabeth and all the terror Annabeth felt over the past couple of hours disappears. Annabeth's laptop, backpack, and dagger were missing, but she doesn't care. She's alive, and Percy is here. Annabeth's friends and Percy reach her, and Percy says, it's okay, we're together now. Annabeth explains everything that has happened to her, and Jason is seriously impressed that she did all that with a broken ankle. In agreement there, Jason, you do not mess with Annabeth Chase. Leo says it may take some maneuvering, but he thinks they can fit the statue in through the stable doors on the Argo II. Annabeth asks what happened to them, and Percy explains everything, and Nico mentions the doors of death. But before Annabeth can comment on it, the cavern groans, and the Athena Parthenon starts to fall. Annabeth screams to secure it, so Jason, Leo, Piper, Hazel, and Frank start to load the statue onto the ship. Hazel says the floor isn't going to last and to get to the ladders. But when Annabeth goes to move forward, she can't. In fact, she's moving backwards. Hazel then screams, cut it! Annabeth doesn't understand, but when she looks down, she does. There's a spider web attached to her ankle, and then she's dragged into the pit. Annabeth is then stopped. The only thing holding her from falling into Tartarus is Percy. Percy is desperately holding onto the ledge with one hand, and Annabeth with the other. Hazel won't make it there in time, and everyone else is still too busy with the statue to realize what has happened. And Nico doesn't have the strength to pull Percy up. Annabeth tells Percy to let her go, but Percy refuses. Never again will they be separated. Percy then looks up at Nico and makes him promise to meet them at the doors of death on the other side. Nico promises he'll lead everyone to the house of Hades. Percy looks at Annabeth and says, "You're not getting away from me. Never again." And Annabeth says they'll be okay as long as they're together. And then Percy lets go. Annabeth and Percy fall into Tartarus. Yup, Rick Riordan really did that to us. Back on the Argo II, everyone is in shock. Leo can't help but blame himself. He thinks that maybe this is the price he had to pay for using the fortune cookie. Everyone is absolutely filled with sorrow. Hazel snaps everyone out of it. Percy and Annabeth are not dead. She and Nico consented, and they're going to rescue them. No one's fault. Nico says he promised Percy that they'd meet them on the other side, and that is just what Nico plans to do. If anyone can survive Tartarus, it's those two. Leo is going to use the Archimedes sphere to perfect the ship. They've got 1 month. They will find the house of Hades, they will take the doors of death, and they will save Percy and Annabeth. And with that determination, the Argo II sets off for Greece. And with that roller coaster of a cliffhanger, the Mark of Athena comes to an end. Up next, Percy and Annabeth fight for their life in the House of Hades. But before I cover the House of Hades, we're going to take a slight detour. Up next, I'm going to be covering a short story called The Sword of Hades, which is really important for the House of Hades. So until then, I'm signing off. And please, Half-Bloods, always remember to stay safe.